A signature, a decree, and entire industries crumble like houses of cards. On June 3, 2025, Donald Trump, barely settled back into the Oval Office, unleashes an explosive measure. Tariffs on steel and aluminum imported to the United States jump from 25% to 50% effective the very next day, a decision that, under the pretext of national security, sends shockwaves across the globe from Lac-Saint-Jean in Quebec to the steel mills of Ha Tin in Vietnam. Why does an American president choose to crush historic allies and emerging partners with such brutality? Who's really pulling the strings in this economic war? And why, as always, are workers, small businesses, and communities the ones paying the price? Tonight, we dive into the burning heart of a protectionism that protects nothing but the interests of the powerful, a protectionism that fractures supply chains, threatens hundreds of thousands of jobs, and reshapes global power dynamics with unprecedented violence. Hey, it's Carlos. I hope you're doing well. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to stay informed on all the latest economic and political news in just a few minutes a day. In Canada, in the Lac-Saint-Jean region, factories that were running at full capacity just months ago are now at a standstill. Robert Bélanger, CEO of ALU MC3, a Quebec-based SME that manufactures streetlight poles and road signage structures, doesn't hide his despair. Before Trump, 25% of our revenue came from the United States. It was our growth engine. Today, zero. These words aren't just an anecdote, they're a cry. They tell the story of a Canadian aluminum industry that, until recently, relied on the US market for 90% of its exports. In March 2025, Washington imposed 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel. On June 4th, those tariffs doubled, soaring to 50%. The result? American clients, choked by prohibitive costs, cancelled their orders overnight. Aluminum ingots, carefully smelted in Quebec, no longer cross the border. They pile up, useless, while jobs vanish. According to the Canadian Labour Congress, 160,000 jobs in the aluminum sector are at risk. Behind these numbers are families who no longer know how to pay their bills, workers watching their factories close, and entire communities sinking into uncertainty. 12,000 kilometers away in Vietnam, the story repeats with similar cruelty. The Hung Nhiep Formosa Ha Tin steel mill, the largest in the country, is an economic powerhouse for the province. Its hot-rolled steel coils, raw billets, and wire rods were, until recently, feeding the US market, a strategic outlet. But with these 50% tariffs, everything collapses. In 2025, Formosa's export revenue plummets by 41% compared to the previous year. Tran An Duong, field director at the company's port department, explains, "We're re-evaluating all our contracts with the United States. That market has become almost inaccessible." Formosa isn't giving up. The company cuts costs, seeks new markets, United Kingdom, Russia, Japan, India, and bets on domestic demand, boosted by Vietnam's public investments in infrastructure. But this pivot comes at a cost: shrinking margins, jobs under pressure, and growing reliance on unstable markets. Formosa's 5,700 employees live in anxiety, even as the company pledges to maintain stability. The numbers from Ha Tin's Ministry of Industry and Trade are stark. In the first 5 months of 2025, semi-finished steel production dropped by 6.51% compared to 2024. It's a warning sign. But let's not kid ourselves, this catastrophe is no accident. It's the result of a cold, calculated, and deeply cynical political strategy. By signing this decree, Donald Trump isn't just protecting the American steel industry, he's sending a message. America First, hammered throughout his campaign, is back with a vengeance. Never mind that Canada is a historic ally, a member of NAFTA, or that Vietnam is a strategic partner in containing China. Trump swings wide indiscriminately under the guise of national security. But what security are we talking about? Does Canadian aluminum, transformed in the US into cars, planes, or soda cans, really threaten American might? Are Vietnamese steel coils shipped to US ports an existential threat? Of course not. This rhetoric is a facade. The real winners are the American steel giants like Nucor or US Steel, who dictate prices while consumers foot the bill. It's also a political ploy. Trump panders to his base in the Rust Belt states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, where the promise of bringing back jobs remains a winning tune. And the media? Too often, they just parrot Trump's bombastic statements without digging into the human toll. They talk tariffs, percentages, but rarely the workers losing their jobs, the SMEs shutting down, or the supply chains collapsing. The backstage of this decision reeks of electoral pandering and disregard for global dynamics. Because what Trump ignores or pretends to ignore is that the North American economy is deeply integrated. Canadian aluminum crosses the border multiple times before becoming a finished product. These 50% tariffs don't protect American jobs. They raise costs for US manufacturers and consumers. A car made in Detroit now costs more because of taxed aluminum. A soda can? Same deal. And inflation, already a scourge, worsens. In 2023, the US imported $82 billion in steel and $27 billion in aluminum. By taxing these imports, Trump drives up domestic prices, and it's ordinary Americans who pay the price. But let's zoom out. This decree reveals a deeper truth. Protectionism is a double-edged sword, a hard drug that gives the illusion of sovereignty while fracturing alliances. Take Canada. Its aluminum industry, concentrated in Quebec, is an economic pillar. By bringing it to its knees, Trump isn't just destroying jobs, he's pushing Ottawa to rethink its alliances. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, during his May 6, 2025 visit to Washington, called these tariffs unjustified and illegal. He vows tough negotiations, but on the ground, anger is brewing. On X, unionists speak of an extinction event for the aluminum sector. Some go further, like one anonymous user who writes, "Trump wants to make Canada the 51st state by strangling it economically." Hyperbole? Maybe. But it captures a sense of humiliation. In the long run, Canada could turn to other partners, Europe, China, to offload its aluminum, risking a reshuffling of geopolitical balances. In Vietnam, the response is different but just as telling. Formosa, realizing the US market has become a trap, pivots to new horizons. The United Kingdom, exempt from the tariffs, becomes a priority target. Russia, India, Japan, and Thailand now absorb 3,500 to 9,000 tons of steel per shipment. Domestically, Formosa banks on demand, fueled by Vietnam's massive investments in roads, ports, and airports. But this shift isn't a victory. Margins shrink, production costs are squeezed, and the company's 5,700 employees live in uncertainty. Ha Tinh's Ministry of Industry and Trade pledges support, with plans for 2026-2030 to bolster exports and logistics, but against unrelenting US protectionism, these efforts risk being a mere bandage on an open wound. What's at play here is more than a trade war, it's a fracture in how the world works. Global supply chains built on decades of cooperation are unraveling. Trump's tariffs don't just target steel or aluminum, they attack the very idea of interdependent trade. And the consequences? They're brutal. In the short term, factories close in Canada, workers lose jobs, and SMEs like ALU MC3 fight to survive. In Vietnam, Formosa scales back ambitions, juggles unstable markets, and sacrifices margins to stay afloat. In the medium term, steel and aluminum prices rise globally, making everything from cars to planes to appliances more expensive. In the US, inflation, already a problem, worsens, and consumers pay. In the long term, these tariffs reshape geopolitical alliances. Canada, humiliated, could draw closer to China or Europe. Vietnam, pushed toward Russia or India, rethinks its strategic priorities. And the youth? They inherit a more unstable world where precarious jobs become the norm and economic crises are manufactured by selfish political decisions. Does this still shock you? That one man, with a single decree, can bring entire industries to their knees, fracture alliances, and plunge thousands of workers into uncertainty? Or have we grown numb to this kind of economic violence dressed up in patriotic slogans? What's happening in Canada and Vietnam isn't isolated. It's a symptom of a world where the powerful play with the economy like a casino, where workers are pawns and promises of greatness benefit only a few. Look at history. In the 1930s, tariff barriers triggered the Great Depression, turning trade tensions into a global crisis. Today we're flirting with the same danger. Steel overproduction, driven by countries like Vietnam seeking alternative markets, could flood markets and crash prices, sparking another wave of factory closures. But there's worse. These tariffs aren't just about money, they're an attack on communities. In Quebec, aluminum workers' families live in fear of losing their homes. In Ha Tinh, Formosa's 5,700 employees wonder if their jobs will last another year. These aren't numbers on a spreadsheet, they're lives, stories, shattered hopes. Meanwhile, American steel tycoons rub their hands, populist politicians ride the wave of anger, and mainstream media miss the point. Why aren't we talking more about these workers? Why aren't we dissecting the contradictions of a policy that claims to protect jobs while destroying others? Because it's easier to amplify Trump's provocations than to dig into the human cost. So what do we do? First, understand, these tariffs aren't a whim. They're a symptom of a world sliding into every man for himself chaos. They reveal a brutal truth. Economic nationalism sold as a miracle cure is a dead end. It fractures alliances, fuels inequality, and sets the stage for worse crises. Then act. Support workers, demand fair trade policies, and refuse to give in. Because if we let the powerful write the rules alone, they'll keep sacrificing the vulnerable for their own gain. Trump's decree is a symbol, a world where selfishness trumps solidarity, where promises of greatness hide human disasters. It's up to you. Will you watch this world collapse or fight for a fairer future? Stay informed, debate, act, because your voice, your anger, your action can make a difference. Don't let them steal our future.